I fully lost myself and lost touch with why I loved exercising, why I ate the way I did. So I started social media pretty much around the time Instagram became a thing. The following just kind of organically happened.
Yeah.
And it was so weird. I always had quite a balanced diet up until that point. And then I just became super obsessive, and it took years to break those habits. My size suddenly was a real big issue. In fact, my New York agency took me off their books publicly. I was going in for measurements every Monday and Friday, and they were basically telling me things like, if you get hungry, have an apple or a Diet Coke. Like, it was ridiculous, the messaging. They even actually at one point said that a lot of girls take up smoking to suppress hunger. Yeah, it was quite a toxic year.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for joining me.
Oh yeah, that's true. I'm actually
Thanks for coming.
You. That's okay.
Made it easy.
Thanks for coming here with me. I just want to get straight into it. We're just going to go way, way back to the beginning of your modelling career, which I believe was when you were 7.
Yeah, it was. I was, very young. I did it for a couple of years when I was a kid. Basically, my parents picked up fairly quickly that I liked being in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Anytime mum got it out for family events and stuff, I was just like, I want to be in it, or at least taking it.
Yeah. Interestingly, same, but the modelling industry did not seem to want me.
No.
They
Really?
accepted you. Yeah.
I'm surprised by that. But yeah, I did it for a couple of years as a kid, and then, as most people do, except I feel like this generation is missing out on the awkward teenage years. Like, they just don't go through it like we did. I don't know.
No, because I was even looking back. I was on a plane yesterday, and you know when you're on a plane, you're just like going through like old photos. You're like, why is this the only time I do this? But
because you're offline.
Exactly. Went back to about second year of uni, which actually I have to disclaim was not that long ago.
Yeah.
And honestly, everyone on social media who followed me was doing a bad job of telling me that I looked absolutely horrendous. There was like a year of like hairstyles that should have been banned. People really should have been telling me. Like, I feel like everyone had.
You have to do it though. You have to go through those moments, and I did. My teenage years at high school, I went through a bit of an awkward phase, and so I didn't do any modelling through that time, and just kind of focused on finishing up with school. But it was a passion of mine that kind of stuck through that time. Even I was in a lot of studio arts classes, and I'd put my hand up if someone needed like a muse or someone to use in the shoot. So I was obviously still super interested. And it was when I graduated and finished school that I signed with my agency, who's still my modelling agency today.
And so back when you were 7 and back when you were getting into those types of jobs, I saw that you had some like quite big name jobs at that time even. Were your parents super supportive of you kind of doing that? Would they take you to castings, etc.? Yeah,
I mean, from memory, like there wasn't actually that many castings as a kid. I think it was more so just if you fitted the mold, then they'd book you for the job. But I remember getting pulled out of school and like going to shoot for like Barbie Mag.
You must have felt so
Battaliano, and I was like, this is sick. I'd go back to school that afternoon and be like pigtails and a bit of lip gloss on, thought I was top shit.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, I really would. You know, that like dream of like being scouted in like I'd be like going to Tesco, not look like, I have to disclaim, it was not like I was looking good, but you like go to the shops and be like, today could be my day. Like, you always heard those rumors of people getting like scouted.
Yeah, I did not get scouted. No. I certainly like put myself forward.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like that was like the absolute like teenage dream. Like 100%. I used to walk around and be like, maybe today's the day. Like 2 foot tall me, you know, really not fitting that mold. And so you, as soon as you left school, was it then that you decided now you know you knew you wanted to model, or were there kind of a few things that you were weighing up in terms of your interests? Yeah,
I mean, throughout school I wasn't super academic. I was always sporty and arty. So a lot of the subjects I did towards the end of my schooling was around those things like food tech, studio art, health, PE. And it's funny because at the time I kind of thought like I was just doing the subjects that I enjoyed, which made sense to me because I was never really super academic. I wasn't striving for a huge enter score to get into some, you know, a really important course that was going to lead me to like being a doctor or a lawyer. I knew that was like never in my, not in my peripherals at all, and not interest either. But I kind of just thought, I'll do the subjects that I enjoy, and I'm happy to go to TAFE and study something like being a PE teacher. I love kids. I love being active, something like that I would love to do. But then I had this huge interest in photography, and then still had this, yearning, I suppose, for modelling. And it was kind of at that point that I decided, along with my parents' support, that I'd have a gap year and not go straight to uni, try to figure out what I wanted to do, and in that time see if I could pick up some modelling. And to be honest, I was super fortunate once I signed with my agency and became available full-time. I had to quit my part-time job at Boost Juice to keep up with the work. So it was really, really exciting. It was an exciting first year. And after that first year, I was kind of like, I reckon I could do this as a career, and just stuck with it.
Yeah, and so decided not to go to university.
Didn't.
Yeah. And at that time, I know that obviously the modelling industry, I still believe, is quite toxic.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that at the time, from what I could see based on my experience of the modelling industry, which was watching America's Next Top Model.
Yes, most people's is.
I feel like it was a very openly toxic time.
Yeah.
Like it was permitted to be that toxic.
Yeah.
Did you know before you got into the industry that I think it kind of feeds into the glamour. Like it was part of that like Kate Moss, like heroin chic type time. And like that was the way it was very much marketed, and almost that was glamorous. It was like, if you can get through this, like you're meant to be here. Was that your kind of perception of the modelling industry?
I mean, I was definitely aware of it. I was obsessed with all things like Victoria's Secret and everything throughout high school. So I was aware of that sort of stuff. But I think I was, I suppose, for the industry that I wanted to go into, fortunate to have quite a fast metabolism, and my genetic makeup was sitting me at a size 8 kind of naturally in Australian sizes. So for me, it was like I kind of already fitted that mold. And that was when I was like 18. And it wasn't really until after I signed, probably a year or so in, that I started to develop more into like my more womanly figure. I was quite a late bloomer when it came to puberty and stuff like that. Still definitely like kind of that sitting at that average 8 to 10 Australian size, which is fine, but it wasn't until I went overseas that became an issue.
And I know that in the US as well, even with those like intricacies, a Australian 8 is a US 4, and they're wanting like 0, double 0,
exactly.
Which is crazy for people listening from the UK. I believe that's like a 4 and a 2, which I believe, like, as in,
which is what I was when I was probably 12, to be honest. Like, and so I think that was really hard, because in my first year of modelling here in Australia, I was fortunate to kind of still fit the standard size in a lot of the jobs that I was running. So I didn't really run into any issues where my agency had to talk about my size or anything like that. But then it was when I went overseas and signed with an agency over in New York and LA that those kind of conversations started to happen. And I was just so excited to be over there. And like wanted to grasp that opportunity and do anything to succeed. So I just listened to them and like kind of soaked up that obsession with losing weight. And it was quite a toxic year, but it was also a huge developmental year for me.
And what made the decision for you to go over to the US? Was it that did you sign with an agency over there? Was it your agency sending you over there? And how long was that after your gap year?
So it was in 2014 and I graduated 2011. So I'd done like 2.5 years in Australia before I wanted to go overseas. And it was really just that, as I said, I was having quite a successful career here in Oz, but for us, there's like a ceiling in Australia. And until you go and make it overseas, you don't become that kind of like really well-known. At the time, my drive was like, I want to be that well-known international supermodel. Like 100%, that was my dream. And I couldn't do that in Australia alone. And so it was kind of one of those challenges that you wanted to like go and like prove to everyone that you could do it. And I think that was the reason why I stayed over there for so long. I mean, definitely didn't stay there for as long as some of my friends got sucked into doing so. But I was there for about 10 months in that first year. And I reckon I got 3 jobs in that 10 months that I was there.
Well, yeah, because I think also there is this kind of perception that if you go over to the US or you're told that you can go over to the US or whatever, it will be this sudden like fast-paced, super glamorous, all of this.
And I totally forgot that it meant I was starting from scratch again. Like no one knew who I was over there. And not only did no one know who I was, but it was a different market. So my size suddenly was a real big issue. In fact, my New York agency took me off their books, off the website publicly, until I was like worthy to be sent to castings with their name next to mine. And so I was going in for measurements every Monday and Friday, and they were basically telling me things like, stop squatting, like take up hot yoga, like if you get hungry, have an apple or a Diet Coke. Like it was ridiculous, the messaging. It was, when I think back to it, I'm like, I cannot believe this is all shit that people say. They even actually at one point said that a lot of girls take up smoking to suppress hunger. And I was like, sick.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I was really fortunate as I grew up to be in a household, like my mum, she's so amazing. And I think now thinking back to how she was with me as a teen, I'm so grateful because she never followed any diets, or even if she did, or even if she was interested or insecure about anything on her body, that was never like reflected around me. I never knew anything about it.
Which I think is so important. And I think we often forget how much of an impact we get from not just like the media growing up, but like the people around us.
100%.
Like I have friends whose parents were constantly, you know, dieting or whatever it might be. Yeah. Like my mum was definitely, you know, it would get to January and she'd do like her January detox and she'd do the Wii Fit every morning. Yeah. But like, I know she literally would on her little step thing. And she was like even it's a generational thing. She was horrified when I started lifting weights. Yeah. Because also like I'm naturally quite a muscular person. I used to be a gymnast. And so she was literally like, huh? Yeah, you're gonna put like muscle to it. Want to do that? Like,
it's so funny, isn't it? And so I think I'm really grateful for that because what it meant was when these things were happening, of course, as I said at the start, I just wanted to do anything to be there and to succeed. So I listened to them and I tried to do things and changed up my routine, and I fully lost myself and lost touch with why I loved exercising, why I ate the way I did. I always had quite a balanced diet up until that point. And then I just became super obsessive, and it took years to break those habits. Like long time, and not just physical habits but the thought patterns. Like there's no word of a lie. Like today I am super comfortable with who I am and I have a super balanced approach to the way I live and exercise and everything. However, it doesn't mean that there's not days where those old thoughts come back up and those guilty feelings come back up. I'm just better at squashing them.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, it is always said that with eating disorders you never truly get rid of it because, you know, the way that you were trained to, even just the understanding of food's nutritional content, for example, this episode will have a trigger warning on it for people who've kind of been through that. But even in terms of like, I remember, so I've, you know, I think a lot of women have had like a disordered relationship with food at points. Thankfully, I never had it like to an extreme extent, but I remember even like the years that I would like count my macros so obsessively that it would be like, oh no, this is okay. I want a burrito this evening, so I'm going to have like just this morning or whatever it might be. And you never, it takes, I mean, the last time I did that was probably like 7 years ago or something, but actually not even that long ago, but still like you know the nutritional value of everything. Yeah. So even if you don't want to be paying attention to it, it is kind of this underlying understanding. I don't know what you have here, but we've just had this law come into play in the UK where every menu,
I'm not into it. I've heard about it.
It is ridiculous. Yeah. Like every single menu has calorie intake on it, which is, I mean, I was eating like a Sunday roast the other day, which is obviously like a very British thing. And I had like the menu and I purposefully don't look at it. And it's like, I have such a good relationship with food now that that's the last thing I want to lose because it's just so tough to get over. And it's taken so long to get to that point. But like, I had the Sunday roast and then my friend had left a load of hers. And so I had her Sunday roast. Yeah. And then I looked at it and it was like 1,500 calories. And I was like,
yeah, like you don't need to know that.
Like, as in like, I would have done that and never would have known. Yeah. And no one dies the next day. Yeah. Like nothing blows up the next week. And I'm thankful to be in a position where like, I don't overcompensate for that with exercise or whatever it might be. But like now I have an understanding of that. Now I'm like that evening, like, oh, maybe... Like, it does come into your mind. You're like, maybe I shouldn't have dinner. Yeah. And then you're like, no. Yeah. This is wild. 100%. If I didn't know that number in my head, it would never actually affect things and nothing would change the next day. It's all, like, based on our perception. I can't believe we're even, like, going in that direction.
I know, it seems really odd and backwards.
So backwards.
I was really fortunate to have not gone down full, like, kind of calorie or macro accounting, but I kind of had almost the opposite. I ended up going down binge eating kind of route. So I was so obsessive with, I suppose, the restrictions of the types of food I would avoid. And there were foods that I used to love and happily have in my routine, and I do now today. But they were perceived as like super bad. So I'd avoid them at all costs, which meant that I would overcompensate with all of the like, you know, hashtag, not hashtag. quotation marks, healthy foods that I believed was like, well, this isn't going to do any damage to my body. Well, and I'd go overdo it.
And we'll come on to social media in a bit, but I do think that like there was also a way that the kind of clean eating movements did
demonized foods.
Yeah, but it also ended up like overcompensating in another direction with like orthorexia, etc., etc. But before we come on to that, in terms of, I want to kind of finish off your story in the US. Where did that go next? In terms of, you know, after that first 10 months?
So, I mean, first of all, people are probably thinking, how did you stay over there for 10 months if you only had a couple of jobs? I was lucky enough to have a contract with some Australian clients. So I often came back, did a job, kind of let me stay over there really to afford it. And I often did like kind of free tests and stuff like that, test shoots with photographers just to kind of muck around and get my name out there. But it didn't really work out. But it got to a point where I just missed home. I felt really homesick. The people that I wanted to, you know, like my family, my friends, I wanted to be around them again. My partner, Josh, who we'd been doing long distance over that time, he had been on a really long kind of traveling trip and he was finally home like a month before I went home. So I think it just got to this point where I was like, I feel like I'm losing myself. I've got these clients that I love working with at home. Like, what am I actually doing here?
Maybe it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, and it just got to a point again where it's funny, when I reflect on my relationship with my agency in New York, my old agency, not my current one, I thought that I was like, I would just do anything that they said, but it did get to a point where I started to push back a little bit. I found these old emails not long ago where I started to talk back a bit and say things like, well, can you just send me to beauty clients? Like, what about hair, face? Like that, surely my size doesn't matter. And I just started to really push that kind of thing, and they would just ignore it or like say something else.
Which is such a mature understanding, I really do think, because I don't think that at that age and given that potential opportunity that I would have just thought it's the price you have to pay to be in this industry. Yeah. And that shows such strength to be in a position of just being like, okay, I'm understanding you say I need this for this, but what if I now have realised that I don't want that? I want, you know, as you say, beauty clients, whatever it might be instead. And I mean, it's such a mature understanding for you to kind of like even be in that position where you were like, both of those things, both being able to push back to that agency who's probably a lot of terrifying people who also at some point, you know, they could just be like, no, do you know what, I make your decision for you. But also just being like, actually being able to say, maybe my success looks slightly different. Like maybe it's not the international supermodel thing. Yeah. Maybe it's me being really great at the jobs I do in Australia or whatever it might be. I think that's, I mean, I like kind of thank God you had that understanding because that could have got so toxic.
Yeah, and I would just compare it to the relationship that I had with my Australian agency, which I absolutely love. Like they've been loyal for me and I've been loyal for them for the last like 11 years. Yeah. And I have such a good relationship with them where we can both be like completely honest, and I kind of missed that, and I noticed that was a big difference. Before I left New York, I did sign with my now agency over there, and they were wonderful and had a very different kind of dialogue with me and had a different understanding of where they were thinking I would fit anyway.
Right, and it's the types of modelling too, because commercial's so different from, and I can understand that if you're putting someone who doesn't have a naturally 00 body shape
and
into
I'm
one.
not 6 foot, so
and so it's like that's not kind of gonna work. And when in this journey did you start social media?
So I started social media pretty much as soon as I finished high school. As soon as I started modeling, I had an account. I believe it was when around the time Instagram became a thing in 2012. And I started it purely just to show my friends and family what I was getting up to, because I was modeling and I was traveling a lot, and I would just share that kind of stuff. And then the following just kind of organically happened. Yeah. And it was so weird to grapple with. I think at the time, I remember when I first started Instagram, there was someone with 12,000 followers, and I was like, oh my God, who is this person? Because it wasn't like a known singer or an athlete. It was just this person. Well, and I was like, what?
Yeah, because I always talk about the start, because I started social media about 2015, so a few years later. Yeah. And I think that I always think back to that time when it was like, influencers were people who were already in the public eye. Like it was people who were existing, I don't know, musicians or actors or being on or whatever it might be. And those were the influencers. And the first few, like you were definitely in that like first kind of like field of people who like started really gaining a following. and it was like digital first, like it was social media first, which must have just been such a strange concept, because I feel like I was kind of in, like I was a few waves later, but even then that was weird. Like even then among people at school, it was very like,
oh, for sure,
what the fuck is going on here?
For sure. It was weird. It was quite cool to be a part of it though, because I remember even with my modelling agency here, I was the first one that had a following, and so that was really confusing, because it was kind of like, well, how do we deal with clients now? Because like there's some clients who want me just for a shoot, and then there's some that want me to post. Like that shouldn't necessarily go through you, should it? Because I'm managing it. And then it was like this really open conversation. We have a really good understanding about it now. And obviously there's some clients that want me for the campaign and then also for posting. So we've worked through that. But it was really interesting. Like we had to work together and like learn the ropes around it. And now it's just like a given. If you're part of a campaign, you're posting about it.
Right, exactly. And it was part of a whole new industry. I mean, even at the time where I started, you would have to beg a company to send you gifting in return for like 20 posts. Like it was not seen as like, now people send gifting with no guarantee of a post, obviously, because it's a type of advertising. Yeah. But it was such a different understanding. Definitely. Like there was no way that companies would pay more for something on social media, because they just saw it as this.
Oh, and I picked up on it pretty quickly. Like I was buying from things and then posting about it as if it had been sent, because I was like, oh, that looks cool. Yeah. And then stuff started to get sent and I was like, whoa, this is insane. But it was years until I actually started getting paid for it.
Yeah, years and years. I think people think that it's like great to be in that first wave, but it also must be quite annoying. So you look at people who were like that much bigger, who are that much bigger now, whatever it might be. And it's like, there's so much opportunity there. Whereas at that stage, you really would have to like, some of the companies, for example, that started at that time got such a headwind from tailwind. It's fine. Is she okay?
We're both missing out by words today.
But yeah, like in terms of actually being able to use influencers without payment or with really low payment. Whereas now if you're paying influencers, unless they're ones with great engagement, you're unlikely to get positive ROI, like all of these kind of various different things. But it must have been so weird working at that stage where it was like, A, what is this? B, do we charge for things? And then also being in the industry where it's like, now, does someone want me more or less, or like any of these things because of social media?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like you started going to castings and one of the questions I asked was, how many followers do you have? Or like write down your account. It was a very odd time. But I think what the coolest thing that came from it though is Kik. Like Laura and I met through modelling, and who's my business partner and best friend. And we met through the modelling industry, but we connected on a lot of the struggles that we both went through with eating and food. And through that, we launched an ebook together, and within that ebook, that was funded through brands that sponsored the ebook, and they were brands that we started to work with. And the only reason we thought that we could even do an ebook and that it might actually get traction was because I'd worked with brands and it had gone well. Yeah, and so I was like, okay, so
but that's
there's this transactional thing going on here.
Yeah, but that's so smart, and so like I think we forget how much like, okay, sure, that's the norm now. Like influencers selling their own products is a real norm, but like that we didn't even know influencers could sell other people's products, let alone set up something that's literally in their own name in order to do that. I think that's incredibly smart. But also at that time, just to kind of set the scene, what I just kind of want to know, like what pace, what type of size in terms of like following, what kind of pace that was growing at and what type of content you were posting.
Yeah, for sure. So I reckon my following, I think it was around 400,000 people around 2015.
Which is huge, like as in like enormous, like at that time. That would have been like percentile wise. Yeah. That must have been so high up.
And it was interesting as well because it was about probably 25% of them were Australian. So often I'd go overseas and people would recognise me and I was like, this is the weirdest thing ever. But it was great. I mean, it was a great base and we took advantage of it and wanted to get a message out there because for Laura and I, that the space at the time with fitness and everything, as you kind of mentioned, it's changed a lot. And social media at the time was very much about fad diets, quick fixes, this is good food, this is bad food, calorie counting, all of that sort of messaging. And then if it was the more kind of wellness message. It was like organic this, organic that.
Yeah,
spend $300 at the superfood store.
We were talking yesterday about how like the photos on social media, it was like this array of fruits. Like it was like all of this. Like I would make like my oats in the morning, and I'd like before posting them on Instagram. Like when I was just starting, it was like doing this like fan of banana around the outside, and then I'd like spend all my money on getting some like cacao nibs that I didn't even like, but I was like, must have the nibs.
100%. And you'd make a recipe from, you know, this cookbook that was, you know, supposedly healthy and full of nutrients, which it would have been full of nutrients, but the ingredients would have cost you like $100 alone for that one recipe, and you'd never use them again, and it would taste like shit. So it was like, this isn't very motivating. And so we kind of just wanted to play in the space of let's take things back to basics. Let's cook food that we did as a family when we were growing up. We didn't think about calories. We thought about whole foods, like everyone should prioritize whole foods, but it wasn't at the extent of having to spend so much money, and you can just get everything from the supermarket. It was just a realistic way of healthy eating.
Yeah, which is so important. And I think a lot of the time now we look back at that kind of like quote unquote Fitspo era, and it's really easy to demonize it. But I think also looking at it contextually in the point of the fact that that was a leap from what the rest of the industry was doing at that time. That was still the time when, I mean, tabloids are still terrible now, but like that was still the time where they would post celebrities on the front of that and be like, gained 20 pounds or like whatever it might be. And it was like very fad diety. So even to have a better understanding of what like healthy looks like, yeah, sure, it wasn't but like as in like I was there at that time, definitely the way I would talk about certain things would be so problematic now, and I would never would. But it's also like looking at that contextually, that's such a difference from what was happening in the rest of the industry and the media, and the fact that you were coming from like an industry where they were being like take up smoking, actually to be like, here's like a healthy, colourful meal that's filled with nutrients and that's not super expensive, whatever it would be, is incredibly like refreshing. I think we look back a lot of the time and it's really easy to be like, like definitely wouldn't be doing that now. But actually, it has to move in steps. And I think that was one of the biggest early things that influencers were really good for. Of course, there was unhealthy things within the industry too, but like it was actually starting to inject a bit of reality that wasn't created by media, which I think was incredibly important to even just get like the insight. And that's why people started following everyone, because they were like, oh my God, I can see what a model's doing from day to day. And that was obviously incredibly glamorous.
Of course. I think we've all learnt so much. But I think what Laura and I are really proud of with Kick is that like at our core, you know, having a sustainable approach to healthy living, like that's been there from the ebook, like the first recipe in the ebook, and is still our main core message to this day. So it's something that we feel like, you know, different fads are going to come and go when it comes to fitness and exercise. That's just the way. And some trends are healthy to jump on, but a lot of them can be problematic or triggering. So I think we've just been really proud to kind of stick to our guns, because I mean, you would know as well, I know you obviously own like multitude of businesses in the space, but there's certain things that works really well in marketing because people are so triggered by lose weight or like get abs in 5 minutes. That is something that we've avoided to stay true to our values, right? But at that comes like a cost to the business, because it would be so easy for us to market that way. But it's really important to us that that's our core message, and that's what our community care most about.
Yeah, 100%. And I almost think that I really did realise one of my observations was that during lockdown, when the fitness industry became actually open to a much wider subsection of people, before that point, I think it had been you'd follow people within the fitness industry or for workouts or whatever it might be, if you were kind of a regular gym goer or wanted to be a regular gym goer. And then I think in kind of lockdown during like COVID times, it opened up to far more people, because it was like, okay, well, we're all going to need to keep active. We're all inside. So like, let's, you know, follow this. And as far as I was concerned, it kind of took this like 8-year step back in kind of being like, everything was like 10 minutes this, 5 minutes this, all of this. And I mean, I very much used to do it. I used to do the like 10 minutes, all of whatever it might be, or like this is my progress within like 3 months, and it's like in terms of, you know, muscle growth, and it's like gonna be hard to grow muscle in that time, or whatever it might be. But we've all kind of grown, and we've all learned, and we've all been able to kind of grow with the industry towards better things. But I did find it really interesting that at the time of lockdown, it was like, because the industry got opened up to a much more commercial thing, probably people who would usually consume media rather than social media, I was like looking around like, oh my God, I can't believe this is like almost happening again.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, people just had too much time on their hands again. And I remember in lockdown, my routine changed a lot too. Like I suddenly could give myself an hour a day, 6 days a week. I mean, now being a mum and being out of lockdown and running a business as well, I work out 3 days a week, maybe 4. But more often than not, it's 20-minute Pilates kick workout at home. Like it's not excessive. It's not what it used to be. But I think what I've learned is, you know, you do what you can with what you've got. And as long as there's some sort of regular movement, that's what makes me feel good and fuels me. And I think through lockdown, you just had so much time that it was easy to kind of jump in or become obsessed. And as you said, to your point, it also opened up the doors to people who didn't necessarily think that way, which I think is a good and a bad thing, because I think for us to prioritize our health, like that's a positive. That's not a negative to be consumed by prioritizing our health, but it's when it takes over and, you know, takes over other aspects of life. But I think the positive in it as well is that for a lot of people, the idea of living a healthy lifestyle seems unattainable because they have some sort of perception of it. Like they might think that it means they have to eat clean and like organic produce, like every meal, every day, and that they have to mind their calories, or that it has to be something they're obsessed with to even tick the box of being healthy. And then when it comes to exercise, it's like it has to make you sweat. It has to be challenging. You know, you have to progress and all of these things. And so people just like, it's too much.
Yeah.
But I think what COVID did was it opened up people's eyes to different ways of training and of eating well. And it's like people who would never, ever would have thought that they would be ever motivated to work out in their living room.
Right.
Were able to work out in their living room. And it means that people who have busy lifestyles or mums, you know, suddenly realize that there was another way that they could move their body and have that kind of inclusion. And they got used to that. And yes, for sure, we're going back to a new reality where, you know, that hybrid approach of like kind of working out from home and working out in the gym is coming back, which is great. Like I love going to the gym and having like my, you know, stronger strength sessions with my PT and stuff. I definitely love it. And I love group classes like yoga and stuff. So I'm definitely all for it all opening up. But I think it's great because it's opened up for those who may not be able to afford a gym membership or afford a personal trainer or things like that, this other way of staying active, which is good. It's important.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And I think that also understanding that, okay, so a 10-minute ab session might be what gets someone who always thought, as you say, that working out was like too much, or always had to be in a gym, or any of those different things. It's much more likely to be the thing that gets someone into it rather than being like, here's 10 moves you should be doing in the gym that actually grow your abs, and they're all, you know, compound lifts and whatever. And actually that's the obstacle for entry to that person is going to be so high. I want to talk about the beginning of Kick and the, you know, when you decided to start that business, what it looked like then versus what it looked like now. Could you tell me a little bit about how you and Laura met and how that turned into the business?
Yeah, for sure. So we met through modelling. We both were in Melbourne Spring Fashion Week in 2013 together, and it was our first fashion week. So we just kind of connected on that and bonded on that. And it was kind of one of those friendships that blossomed really quickly. Like you met someone and you feel like you've known them for years kind of vibe. So that was really beautiful. But then we both spent time overseas. Laura did a few months in Europe and I went and did my stint in the US. And we stayed in touch over that time. And that's when we really kind of bonded over the struggles we were having. Came back, connected on that. And at the time, Laura had a blog called Food, Fit and Repeat, where she would just post random recipes and just blog content that I loved. I loved recreating her recipes. And so often when people were asking me what recipes I was eating or, you know, where I got my inspiration from, I would say this blog. So I had this dream, like a literal dream. And this is when ebooks were really big and new at the time.
Yeah.
And that we created an ebook together of our favorite recipes. And so we did it, and we literally Googled how to make an ebook.
Right.
We got one of my closest friends, her boyfriend was studying in design at the time, and so he kind of like pasted something together for us. And we shot over 37 recipes in one day with like this fashion photographer, a friend of ours. And it's funny because like there was like a banana bread that was like 3 days old when we shot it and it was all slimy and like, but we didn't know. And, you know, my mum was there on the day, like helping us clean. Like it was very kind of fun project. It was absolutely not something that we were thinking, oh yeah, we'll do this and it's going to succeed and it's going to turn into what it is today. It was definitely something we just were passionate about and wanted to do on the side. Got those brands on board, as I kind of mentioned earlier, which funded it, which was great because it meant from the get-go we weren't out of pocket.
So they were funding the like production of the whole thing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Really smart to do that.
It was really just like neither of us, I suppose maybe neither of us had enough faith in it that we wanted to like empty our pockets for it. But at the same time, we had enough faith that we could say to a brand, like, jump on board. You want to be on board with this.
Yeah. And also to like know the currency that you were like operating in. Like it's going to sell a lot of things and we're putting it on social media and like they should want to be part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it sold really well. And
do you have any figures?
We sold, I believe, over 7,000 copies pretty quickly. I don't remember exactly, but it was very surprising. Like we were like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then from there, a bit of a community started to form and they were wanting more. And the thing about an ebook is like once it's done, it's like, okay, do we do another one? What we ended up doing was kind of revamping Laws's blog and turned it into a subscription blog called Keep It Cleaner. And we started releasing 1 workout and 3 recipes a month on there. And subscription was really new at the time. So we started to get a subscription base, which was exciting. And we were like, hey, so something's happening here. And then we ended up working with another company and had a website called Kit Girls, which was a program-based website. And really with that company, we worked with them for about a year. We learned so much in the space. And I suppose the biggest thing we learned was like how much we both actually wanted to be a part of the weeds of the business and like be in every corner and control everything, not just be the faces and not just be in the content, but be a lot deeper in it.
And I think one of those big things is like what does make sense within the influencer industry is like it makes sense to have people who come in who do the tech or the operations or whatever, because like just because you might be known for recipes or fitness, it doesn't mean you're the best person to develop
100%.
like the website or do the customer service or any of these things. And I think that's really important. But there is also an element of that where it's like your face is pasted on something that someone else is operating, which only has you can only care a certain amount and do that.
Yeah.
Like I realized this pretty quickly too. It was like, I was great at outsourcing from the beginning. Like the first year I did it all myself and then I kind of had other people come in and I would just be on them the whole time because I'd like be mortified when someone had a terrible experience and it would just be that the email had gone to like the junk or whatever it might be. Yeah. And it's like, I think there is this understanding that makes so much more sense, which it does in a lot of scenarios. Like I will say that outsourcing and getting people to do the things that aren't your expertise is so important, but it's also like when you're putting your face on something,
you gotta be sure.
And you're turning people who would usually like your photos into customers, therefore they're paying money to get a good experience. And like it's so easy for people to suddenly just be like, wait, I really liked you and I followed you for years and I took my hard-earned money to pay you something for something. And then if they have a bad experience, like it would literally make me like hyperventilate. Like when we were going through screenshots yesterday on the plane, the amount of screenshots, like going through like old photos, every few photos, it would literally be me screenshotting a DM of someone who had like a bad experience. And obviously I was sending it to the team being like, what is going on?
100%. And it's so funny. We were exactly the same when we used to do the customer service and I'm so glad that we don't now. But I mean like, we're super proud. We've got over 8,000 reviews on Apple and 5-star reviews, which is awesome. But like, there's obviously been times when, because it's a tech company, things haven't gone right, or it might be someone's single phone that is the issue, not the actual app.
Well, that's one of the big things with apps as well. Is like if you don't update, then or like you haven't updated your iOS, like something is going to go wrong.
Something, right? And so, but what we kind of forget out of like thousands of users, this one comment would come through and we'd be so fixated on it and want like everyone to drop this. So it got to a point where everyone was like, okay, we think that we can handle the customer service and you guys kind of need to not. And that was great. And as you said, I think we are so proud of our team. We have a team like of expertise that are super passionate about what we do, and that's awesome because it means that we can, I suppose, have so much autonomy, but then also get to collaborate in everything, whether it's like the development of new tech in the app, that's something I'm really close to and I absolutely love, to, the designs that happen on each campaign and the social media strategy, all of that stuff. We love being a part of it all. And that's just, we're super fortunate that we work with a team that is so collaborative in that light. But as you said, it does get to a point where you've also got to make sure that you're bringing expertise. Like, you can't be good at everything. And then it's also when you're the face of the business and you're the front and the energy, and you have to bring that to the community, you can't be 100% in the weeds all the time.
Yeah. And I also think that there's one of the other misconceptions is the fact that, like, of course, having a business and having a following means that you get pretty much some guaranteed demand. If you have good engagement, you're likely to get some guaranteed demand. But on top of that, it means that you need to start a business operating at a level that can cater to thousands of customers. And that means you can never have a trial run for something that's about to essentially... You know, say those 7,000 customers, if that was a few days in, that is to be able to, for a business to be able to cater to 7,000 customers, there, even if 1% of them has issues, that is days of replying. Like, as in, like, it's a lot of fucking work. And, like, that's not to say that it's a bad thing, and that's not to say that it's a complaint, but it is a really interesting, quite complex thing when you think about it, is that, like, how do you start a business with no trial run at a level that can cater to that many people that often, you know, takes years to get to? And of course that's a huge benefit, but actually it's also a huge risk. I mean, I'll say that our first ever Tala launch went so well in terms of demand, and it took months to fix. Like, the entire back end fucked up. It fucked up things in fulfillment, linked to whose order was what. Like, people were receiving the wrong things. Someone received, there was something ridiculous. I can't remember what it was. It was like someone received like a tape measure. Right. Like, rather than like their leggings. And I was like, okay, this is a point. Like, something needs to be...
at some point though, like, it's human error. And there's got to be room for it. And I think that's the one thing, like, we've learned as well, is we're super open with our community. It's the wider community that you're more concerned about, right? The kind of colder audience, that's the huge risk. But if you're super engaged with your own community, I mean, we've been honest with them at times when we've promised a product release that hasn't happened on time or whatever, we'll just tell them why. But one of the biggest risks that I can think of is when we left that company and decided to go and do our own thing, we lost all data, all content, had to start from scratch, and we wanted to launch an app. And so we went off and did that on our own and started our own team. And because of contractual reasons, we couldn't even tell the community of the PASS program that it was happening. And so it was a really scary moment because we had...
So did they own all of your data essentially?
Yeah.
Which is
we own our social media channels.
Oh, which thank God you owned that. Yeah. But also, like, it's so... With the start of any new industry, there are people who saw it coming, who are able to be... And I don't know the people you're working with. I don't know whether they were great, not great, whatever. But, like, it is quite predatory to go to, like, young people who you know are able to turn people into customers and essentially ask them to sign something that actually is, like, sure, they might sign it, but does that mean that it's, like, morally correct? Like, should you own this customer's data based on the fact that, you know, and for you to, I have so many horror stories of people who've left licensing agreements, who have had the most, like, who've lost every single penny of that company, or lost every single, like, penny of profit that they weren't paid out to that date, or, like, whatever. And it equates to, like, sometimes even millions. Like, I've had friends who it's cost millions to get out of a contract. And I mean, it's quite, I would love for, like, a back end, like, documentary to be done on, like, the influencer industry. And that's not to say that everyone within that space is terrible. I still work with some licensing providers. I think there are some that are absolutely amazing, but the amount of people who I've had conversations with who've been like, this has happened, and I've been like, what? What? Like, as in, like, how on earth can these people, like, how can people live with themselves? Like, literally being like, oh, we'll go to this, like, 20-year-old person who's new in their career and suddenly got a following and basically steal all their customer data and, like, all of that. Anyway, that's wild to me, but that's all it's
But and I mean, like, to be honest, like, it wasn't like a toxic ending to that relationship or anything at all. It was really just that we wanted to do it ourselves. We wanted to take it, and that was just the contract that we were in. So we accepted that and took that risk and moved on. And we got all of our subscribers back plus more within a day of launch. So it was really exciting and reassuring, I think, when that happened.
Of course.
But it was, definitely very, very anxious. Nervous.
I can imagine that just being, like, such a nervous, especially, like, an app is not cheap to create.
No.
I mean, it costs hundreds of thousands usually.
Yeah.
And so to be able to create that off the back of money you've made off the previous deal that you can't even, like, customer data is why people buy businesses.
Yeah.
Like customer data is one of the most valuable things. And that's not like, for anyone listening, that's not like the kind of data that you see, the like terrifying.
No,
like,
no.
You know, it's not that. It's like, who is this customer? How many times have they purchased?
Totally.
What do they like? What types of things do they click on?
Because you learn so much.
Which is literally how you make business decisions. So
100%.
to lose all of that, I can imagine both terrifying, and also then having to invest, having lost that into a new thing.
So when we launched the app, we had a rev share agreement with an agency who built it. So that was the way we were able to fund it. And that was great for a long time, and we learned a lot working with them. But we now have our own in-house dev team, which is just awesome. It's really great to have people like across the desk and just who can be so nimble and just work on your product. So that's been exciting.
Yeah. Were you nervous to get into that new agency agreement following the previous one?
Not really, to be honest. It's funny. Through business and like collaborations and partnerships with different brands and everything, like obviously we've seen our fair share of contracts and agreements. Laura actually finished her law degree. So she's
amazing, very helpful. My music degree serves me well.
Look, I don't have a degree, so sweet. You're one up on me. And but no, so I mean, we just work through it, and look, not every contract we've signed has been amazing, but like you learn so much every single time. And we were really excited to be able to work with this agency, and it just got to a point where for both parties it was ready to kind of part ways, and we really wanted to bring our dev team in-house, which we have, and that's been a challenge in itself. Like obviously, whilst we worked with dev teams before, I'm learning every single day about the back end and how it all works.
What was how long ago was that?
So that was the start of last year, which was I'm so bad since COVID. The years are like blending together. 2021.
So even since then, I think again with the influencer starting and owning business thing, if you do a licensing agreement for the first few years and people are managed by various people, there's like the dev team managed by various people, it's very different from then becoming a people manager and obviously still being the face to a certain extent. Like of course the business has its own legs and all of this, but like you are still content creating, you are still posting and all of that, and they're two very different types of jobs. But if you own that company, and if you can have great people managers in there, but ultimately if it's your vision and you want your vision to come to life, you're suddenly a people manager when actually you, especially if you haven't had a kind of, I don't know, office job or whatever it might be, like it's very, very different to suddenly go from like creating content to then being like, I'm now managing the devs and like signing off this strategy. I can imagine that's been a huge change.
Hugely. And I mean, it's one of the biggest challenges that we face like on a daily basis, but it's also super exciting. I mean, one thing Laura and I both have in common is our openness and willingness to like learn. And we are never, ever sitting in a room. We don't like to be the smartest people in the room, put it that way. Like we've hired people to learn from them, and like really what they get from us is to make sure everything aligns to the values, the direction, the goals, like all of that sort of stuff. Of course, as you said, the vision for the business. And I love that, but I just love collaborating with them. And I think that's something that I found really fascinating in myself, because I think when we first started this venture and when the team started to grow, so much self-doubt came in because, as I mentioned, I don't have a degree. I didn't even study business in school. Like I was not academic. I never thought I'd work in an office. I had girlfriends who were like obsessed with the idea of like wearing heels and a skirt to work every day and a shirt. And I was like, no. Like I want to be in my runners, like maybe with some kids or just outside, not in an office. Didn't see it ever. But now I love it. And it's not to say that I wouldn't love the latter either. Like I love when we get to go on tour and work out and be in touch with the community. I love when we're doing our shoots. Like I'm so still connected with all of that. But it has been an interesting challenge and a really exciting one, managing a team and being a part of a team. I
can imagine. And since that kind of moved beginning of last year, what have been the biggest learnings you've had in terms of running a business?
There's so many.
Like, would we like a list?
I don't know. I mean, I think as long as you're strategic about it, risk is a good thing. Like taking risks is a good thing. We've learned that time and time again. I think something that has definitely been something we've learned over the years is that our gut is pretty much always right. Like there's been so many times we haven't trusted our gut, or we've just gone with what someone else has said we should do, even though it didn't feel right. And like all of those times, it wasn't necessarily wrong and it wasn't super detrimental. We've been fine, but we've learned so much from them. And so I think that we are more connected with the brand and business than I think we think we are.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's really hard to see your strengths in that way when it's not necessarily I don't know, as you say, you don't have a business degree. It's not something that you like write down in a strength in that way, but it's like, no, if you've formed this company over a good number of years, you know the customers, you talk to them every day, the ability to understand your customer that well is a huge strength.
Yeah.
And actually not many people other than you and Laura will actually be able to do that. And so really being able to lean into that. I think one of my biggest learnings was being like, oh, like that's a huge strength and you don't need to develop all of the other strengths in the world.
Exactly.
As long as you can hire people to do things really well. Like I know where my strengths are on like product and marketing, but actually in terms of logistics, in terms of the finances, in terms of all of those things, I am never going to be the best person at that.
100%. It's about recognizing where your strengths are and where you can add value. And I think that was also something that Laura and I, we kind of recognized a couple of years ago, was that we didn't really have role titles. Like we didn't have a title. We just kind of worked across different things.
Yeah, I used to give people the wildest job roles. Yeah. Like titles. I look back and I'm like, that's not a thing. I
mean, we restructure, like you just have to do what works at the time, right? And it got to a point where our team really needed to understand, like, who do I go to for, you know, like, do I have to get both of your approvals and everything? Yeah. And we both, I think because we were best mates and we're so used to working with each other and we started off just the two of us, we naturally gravitated towards where our strengths lay. And for me, that's like creative and community and all of that sort of stuff. And for Laura, it's much more like on the finances and kind of organizational stuff. So we naturally just did that without ever actually making it a thing. And then we ended up having roles. So Laura's is our CEO and she's smashing it. She's so incredible and working her butt off. And it's just been incredible to kind of see her blossom into that role. And now we have these very different, clear kind of directions. So team members know if they're wanting anything to do with like brand, well, brand actually comes under both of us, but if it's like a quick win for branding or colors or design tweaks or social strategy, community stuff, or as I said, I work really close to the dev team on the whole design of new features and everything like that. I'm kind of customer experience, and then Laws is the operations and running of the business and the kind of up
Which
top.
is so handy. I mean, to think that you guys met in the same background and have such complementary skills to be able to build a business is just, I mean, it's the dream.
It is, and we're so lucky. I think the biggest thing is that we are so lucky that we have, like, our business partner is someone that we trust so much. Like, business partners don't always work out, and a lot of the time when it's to do with like a friendship or when it's based off that, it can be really risky. But I think with our friendship, we've always had so much, like, the utmost respect for one another. We've both been so open and always kept communication open. So if anything's ever felt a bit off or something that was a bit tension or anything like that, which to be honest, it rarely is. But it's not to say we don't disagree. We definitely have different brains.
But
like,
I think
we're
that's
different
healthy.
people. Yeah, 100%, to challenge each other. We've been able to overcome everything, and I don't know, I definitely couldn't have done it without her, and I don't know if I could have done it with anyone else. Yeah. Like, I don't know of anyone else in my life that I feel like I can be as honest with and trust. You know, I'm so trusting of everything. If she's looked at it, I'm cool. Yeah. If she likes it, I'm happy.
But I think also what I really didn't give enough thought to was the fact that, like, in wider life, okay, so you have a relationship with someone, that's probably like a romantic relationship is probably the closest you get to that similar relationship. Yeah. Like, you have to work through issues, you have to work through good, you have to work through bad, you have to work with each other's emotions, you have to know how to give criticism, you have to know how to take feedback, like all of these different things. The only other place that happens, like, as in, like, that to me is the closest thing you can say to, like, co-founders or, like, a relationship between a founder and the CEO or the founder and the MD or whatever it might be. And if you think of, like, what we go through to spot a romantic partner, thinking that that will work out in a business sense is actually a big fucking, like, risk. And it's like, so I get on so incredibly well with the managing director of Tala, and we were like an arranged marriage through, like, recruitment. Yeah. And the fact that just worked out.
It's so good.
Is I mean, thank my lucky stars, and like she knows this, but like we're so different.
Yeah,
but we're able to communicate so well, and we're able to like we can have a really, really shit, or like one of us can have a really, really shit week. We can be pulling our hair out.
Yeah,
we know how to like. There was a thing a few weeks ago that she had to be like, "You're not giving feedback well in this, and it's fucking up the team." And I was like, oh, but it's like so important. And actually, where else in your like working relationships would you genuinely be able to do that with a lack of hierarchy, but also an ability to have a hierarchy over each other, but also like it's such a complex thing, and I don't think I ever truly thought about it. And I remember like reading one of my first business books, and I remember like there was just this chapter being like, don't be a solo founder, and I was like a little bit late, like a few years in, but like since having great like managing director, commercial director people I work really well with, I can so see why. Like it's such a lonely, strange job. It's amazing in so many ways, but like how can you rely on yourself to be able to like after an exhausting week or something going really wrong, or you have a huge emotional attachment to something, how can you rely on yourself to make a good decision when actually realistically like you need someone to bounce off of, and most people won't talk back to you or say if something's a really bad idea if you're really passionate about it. It's
so important. That relationship is so important. It's not even at that level either. It's like within the team as well. I mean, you spend more time with these people. More often than not, you spend more time with your team than you do your loved ones. So you've got to enjoy, there's got to be some sort of positive culture there, as well as like being challenged. Well, I mean, like I've worked in teams where I've had business partners that it hasn't worked out. And it wasn't right. And that was super challenging. Anytime there was a hurdle in business, it was really hard because we didn't trust each other. Didn't respect each other, didn't trust each other. And so I feel like I've learned a lot through that. And I also count my lucky stars that I found Laura, because it's been awesome. And I mean, like, there's still so much to do.
And I'd love to know, before we close off, I'd love to know if you were talking to the younger you that had just gone to the US, for example. She's there, she's ready to make it as an international supermodel. She's only getting 3 jobs, she's being told to lose weight and take up smoking, etc. What would be the biggest piece of advice that you'd give to her?
If I'm talking to that girl, I would say that I know it's really hard. It's not going as you'd planned. And it is definitely going to be one of the toughest years of your life, but you are going to grow so much from this. And like magic is honestly going to happen from this. And I think it's one of those things that whilst, a big part of what we do at Kick is to either help girls through that time or to help them avoid it altogether, falling down like an unhealthy relationship with food and exercise. It's like through that time, I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, but also it's been something that's taught me so much about myself and so much about the industry that helped fuel Kick from the beginning.
And it also put you exactly where you needed to be. I think like we always have this perception of our like goals and dreams as them being the right thing, and like that wasn't the right dream for you. Like you were able to make it as like say even internationally in a completely different way, in a way that was much more suited to you and your mental health. And that's not a negative, that's like a huge positive. And actually you probably needed that experience to like show you that actually no, your path's slightly different, but it's still really great. Like hold on, hang 100%. On in there.
100%.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks.
This has been such a good little chat.
Yeah,
I've really, really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Very much enjoyed the trip down memory lane as well.